1.
The man jailed for forging Prime Minister Harold Wilson's signature more than 30 years ago is back behind bars. Ronald Milhench is in a Hong Kong prison cell, awaiting trial later this month on fraud and firearm charges. The 56-year-old was jailed for 3 years in 1974 for falsifying documents to suggest that Harold Wilson supported a land deal in which Milhench was involved. Milhench moved to the Philippines in 1980. The new woman in his life, Alcan Khan, 18, who shares his Manila home, said his current venture was importing radio cassette players into China.
2.
Zenith Motor Parts, can I help you? The order you placed hasn't arrived. I'm sorry about that. Perhaps you could ask at your local post office. No, I'm afraid I can't send a replacement package. As a secretary, I don't have the authority to do that. You'll need to speak to Mr. Brown, the manager for customer services. Certainly, sir. I'll put you through now.
3.
Listen to this. You can eat your light meal at midday or in the evening, whichever you prefer. You can save fruit or yogurt from a meal to have as a snack during the day. It is important to weigh your food and to follow the recipes given. Quite often, a gain in weight is just due to eating too much rather than eating the wrong foods. Do not add salt in cooking or at the table. Low-calorie dressing may be used on salads. Try to take as much exercise as possible to burn calories. Playing tennis or walking and swimming help you lose weight.
4.
Good morning, Mrs. West. Ready for the Christmas holidays?
Morning, George. Yes, with the whole family coming, I've had to buy a lot more than usual.
Well, what can I get you?
5 pounds of flour and some yeast, please.
Planning to do some baking?
Yes. All the kids love my homemade bread, you know.
There you are. Anything else?
Yes, I need a pint of milk and half a pound of cheddar cheese. And then I have to go to White's to pick up my turkey and joint of beef.
5.
Welcome to the land of Cinderella castles. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there lived a king called Ludwig, whose dearest wish was to make all of his subjects happy. So he built them fairy tale castles. Soon the land had the most beautiful castles in the world. That faraway land was Germany, a land full of beautiful surprises. So come to the land of Cinderella castles, the land of Ludwig, the land of happy ever after, where childhood dreams come true. Come to beautiful Germany.
6.
Okay, the next candidate is, let's see, Robert Croft. Left university at 21, worked as a farmer in Africa for 3 years. Joined Y Agricultural College as a lecturer. He's been promoted twice and has published a book on efficient farming.
All in all, he looks very impressive. He could be a great asset to our company. He seems the most suitable person for the post. On paper, anyway.
Okay, let's have him in.
7.
Moving there would have so many advantages and not many drawbacks.
More space for a start. We need the extra bedroom.
More space, and it's a nicer neighbourhood.
The park opposite the house would be great for the kids. Yes, and there's a double garage. No more parking on the street.
But it would mean the children moving schools, just when they've settled into the ones they're at now.
Yes, that is a nuisance. And what about the cost?
Oh, it's pretty high, that's true. We'd have to economise. But I'm sure we could manage. I really think the move would improve our lives.
8.
Thank you for calling White World Books and Music. I'm sorry all the lines are busy at the moment, but your call will be answered soon. If you were calling about fiction and non-fiction books, please hold the line. You can leave a message after the tone. If you are calling about sheet or recorded music, please call our music department direct on 968 124 2863. Thank you.
Part 2.
As you might have just heard on our local news roundup, Lawrence Mackenzie, one of the town's most memorable characters, died yesterday at the grand old age of 91. We have with us in the studio this morning Miss Susan Stevens, his neighbour for many years. Hello, Susan, and welcome.
Hello.
She's going to tell us something about the man who, all his life, avoided publicity and attention, but nevertheless was well known to many. Susan, what made Lawrence Mackenzie so special?
I'd say because he was a man of contradictions, really. His public behaviour always seemed to be the opposite of what he did in private.
What do you mean by that?
Well, for instance, he always gave the impression of being mean with money. The local shopkeepers have dozens of stories about him, complaining about errors in his bills, no matter how small, not to mention the slightest price rise. And yet it's common knowledge that he secretly gave away very large sums of money.
But, well, if it was secret, how could anyone know about it?
Oh, he had rather strange handwriting, you know. And the story goes that every time a volunteer worker called at his house to ask for a contribution, he sent them away with nothing. And then, maybe weeks later, the charity would receive a massive cheque, along with an unsigned note in the same childlike handwriting.
It sounds as though he did a lot of complaining.
In public, yes. And he always seemed to be too busy to talk to people. If he saw someone he knew approaching, he'd cross the road. And sometimes it was funny, because he'd, pretend to be looking at a shop window display, even if it was women's fashions. But then, at the same time, people who were in trouble would get a phone call one night, and his unmistakable voice would come on the line, so faint they could hardly hear it, offering sympathy for their misfortune and practical suggestions as to what to do to put the matter right.
And I believe he was quite an eccentric dresser. He wore very unusual clothes.
Yes, indeed. In spite of his surname, he wasn't actually Scottish. But he'd often wear a kilt, but only in winter. I always used to worry he'd catch a cold. At 91, you should be wearing warm trousers, not a kilt.
Any other peculiarities?
Well, millionaire or not, he did his shopping at the local supermarket, and he'd only buy food on special offer. He never treated himself to expensive food, like steak or lobster. He'd buy sausages or cheap cuts of meat. And he refused to have any help in the house. He insisted on doing all his housework himself.
Well, there you are. It certainly seems Lawrence Mackenzie wasn't everything he seemed at first sight, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will mourn his passing.
Part 3. Speaker 1.
The race was a shambles. That Steve Honeywell should be disqualified. He elbowed me in the face right at the start, then he trod on my foot. I couldn't get past him without being barged. The man's a menace. They ought to disqualify him. I mean, it's a disgrace, an absolute disgrace. I'm off right now to tell the officials.
Speaker 2.
It was a bit of a rough race. There was a lot of pushing and shoving, so I ran to the front and tried to stay there. At least I was clear of trouble there, and I thought I was running quite a good race. I felt good, though I couldn't really see what was going on behind me. Then, in the last 100 metres, Steve Honeywell and John Thorndyke got past me and beat me to the line. After being in front for much of the way, I was just so disappointed.
Speaker 3.
Oh, I just don't know what went wrong. I never felt comfortable during the race, and I couldn't manage to get up to the leaders. By the final lap, I felt like my legs were made of lead. All that training for nothing. The sponsors won't be pleased either. I know they were banking on me getting a medal. And what am I going to tell the family? I don't know. I know they expected me to win. I've let everybody down.
Speaker 4.
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled with the gold. Everything went according to plan, really. I mean, I knew it was going to be a tough race. There was some pushing and shoving at the beginning, but I managed to hold on to a good position just behind the leaders. and I saved enough for the final stretch. I was able to sprint in and hold off the others. It felt really good all the way. I'm off to celebrate now.
Speaker 5.
That was a bit of a disaster from my point of view. Someone trod on my foot on the first lap. After that, I couldn't keep up, no matter how hard I tried. But I didn't come here to give up, so I kept running. I thought I did well in the end, to finish as well as I did. OK at the back, but what? Only 20 metres behind the rest. Next time I'll show everyone. I'll win.
Part 4.
Lots of people thought I was crazy to even think of teaching my son at home. If I'm honest, I was in two minds about it myself. It was such a risk to take, both for myself and my son. But then I remembered why this idea of educating Tom at home had come up in the first place, and I knew it was the right thing to do. You see, Tom's always been a quiet boy, the kind who doesn't speak for the sake of it. He's quite, reserved. If he feels there's something important to say, then he'll say it. Otherwise, he keeps himself to himself. And he's not what I'd call a group person. He'd never want to be in a gang. He does have friends, but not many. He goes to a swimming club, and his friends were always from there, not school. He's quite a good swimmer, but not a potential Olympic champion. Apart from that, he isn't really interested in sport at all, not even football, which his dad is mad about. So, anyway, all these things made it difficult for him to be accepted by the other boys at school. Added to all this, he's a bright boy who loves reading, and some kids feel threatened by a bright classmate. But his problems didn't become apparent until he went to secondary school when he was 11. At primary school, Tom was happy and was particularly friendly with a couple of girls, and his teachers there were wonderful, very caring and supportive. But the school had only 200 pupils, compared to 2,000 at the comprehensive. There you were just a number, and the teachers didn't really know what was going on, or even want to know. I'll always remember the day Tom came home with a black eye, and his trousers were torn. He was obviously distressed, but he wouldn't tell me what had happened. He went back to school the next day, but was obviously very nervous about going. Then the day after that, he refused to go back, and I found out from his sister that a group of older boys had been bullying him for weeks and had beaten him up. I was horrified and so upset that Tom hadn't been able to tell me about it. I went to the school, but then I realised they couldn't monitor the situation. So that's when my husband and I knew the only thing we could do was to take him out of regular school. Tom agreed, and from that day on he was happier and more relaxed. We decided that I'd give up my job and teach Tom at home. I was chief accountant at a multinational company, so of course I lost my high salary. As a result, we've had to cut down on spending on things like holidays abroad, going out for meals, and I had to sell my beautiful sports car. That was difficult. It also means I miss out on adult company with my work colleagues, and there's no chance of having a career again for a couple of years still. But Tom is doing really well academically, and I'm so proud of him. I managed to teach him all the basic subjects, such as English and maths, but the sciences have proved a problem. I can teach the theory, but we can't do any practical experiments which make the subject come alive. Luckily, his aunt is a languages graduate, so she helps him with French and German, and his dad teaches him skills like woodwork and technical drawing. Far from him missing out, I think Tom has probably had a wider and better education. He's just passed all his GCSE exams with excellent results, and he's developed as a personality. He has a girlfriend and goes out at weekends just like any other teenager. It hasn't been an easy time, but seeing how Tom has turned out, I feel it's been worth it.